If you're interested in seeing a real-world review of the Canon T7i, also known as the 800D, then stay tuned. This video is for you. I've received a lot of questions regarding the Canon T7i, again also known as the 800D, depending on what part of the world you live in. This camera's been out for a little while, but I think most of you just want to see me put it through the real-world paces like I do with my other camera reviews. And I was able to get my hands on this recently, and I thought now's a good day to make this happen. As I do with my other videos, let me just level set with you. So where I am in the world, it's relatively warm today. We're in the upper 40s, and that's Fahrenheit. There's a little bit of wind out here, but we do have some sun, and it's going to be going down probably in the next hour or two. So we have a little bit of daylight to get out and test this camera. Now, as I step through this, I want you to know that I'm using the 18-55 kit lens right here, and I'm going to shoot in RAW, and most likely I'm going to be in aperture priority. Now that means that I'm going to do a little post-processing, and I do so in Lightroom. I have a handful of videos on how to use Lightroom, and I may post links to those in the description below, so if you're interested, go ahead and take a look at those links. Now I'm going to give you the game plan, and it's this. I'm going to start off by referencing my notes right here, which I use to keep me on point. Now I'm going to talk about some of the key features of this camera. More often than not, when manufacturers put cameras out, they overload people with a plethora of features. Now if you're relatively new to the world of photography, your head can start to spin. So I'm really just going to key on just a small handful of important features that I think come with this camera right here. After that, I'm going to do a little video test with the camera. I just want to see how the autofocus works, and we'll see how it is as a vlogging camera. We're also going to test out the internal built-in microphone here, and we'll see what that sounds like. And then we're going to get into the meat of this camera, and that is a lot of demo work, taking real-world photos. I want to go around and take some landscapes and some fast action shots if I can find it, and some low-light type photography. We're also going to do a little night photography with this camera. Really, I just want to put this camera through the paces, see how it performs. And after all of that, I'm going to finish up and give you a few final thoughts and let you know how I really feel about this camera. So with all that said, let's go ahead, jump right in, and have some fun. To begin with, this camera offers a fully articulating touchscreen, which works really well. I find it to be responsive, and it's nice, and it's especially handy if you want to do any type of self-composition, which if you want to do vlogging and things like that, this comes in really, really handy. Now this is also an APS-C sensor with a 24 megapixel resolution. Now, what does that mean? Well, essentially this is referred to as a crop sensor camera, and 24 megapixels seems to be the sweet spot that a lot of manufacturers are going for. I see that in a lot of cameras, and it seems to work really well. This camera is no exception right here. Now, this camera also offers an ISO range of 100 up to 25,600. Now, if you're relatively new to photography, you might be thinking, well, what does that mean? Well, essentially, the 25,600 is a maximum native ISO. Now, the higher the ISO means the more sensitive the sensor can be to low light. And that means if you're in a low-lit situation, this camera has a good opportunity of capturing that image. Something else to keep in mind, though, is that the higher the ISO, the more noise or grain you get in the image. Now, I'm not too concerned about that. A lot of post-processing softwares out there can help reduce some of that noise, but it's just nice to know this goes all the way up to 25,600. The shutter speed on this camera ranges from 30 seconds all the way up to 1/4000th of a second. It can also go into bulb mode. What does that mean? Well, bulb mode allows the photographer to open and close the shutter at will. That means you can leave it open as long as you want. And you might be asking yourself, well, is 1/4000th of a second fast enough? More often than not, absolutely. I've taken a lot of photos, and it's rare that I need to go anywhere close to 1/4000th of a second or even faster. You typically get up around that range if you're doing sport shots and you need a lot of light. So I'm going to say for 99% of your photos, again depending on what you do, you're probably going to be fine with that speed limitation. Now this camera also offers 45 focal points. Those are my notes, just flying right by. I had them right there tied to the tripod, and the wind picked it up and carried it on. So I don't think I'm going to cut that out. Let's leave that in because I want to keep moving here. So it offers 45 focal points, and what's nice about that is these focal points are cross-type. Now, cross-type points means, in short, that this is going to be a really good autofocus system. And something I want to talk about real quick is going to be the video. So what are the video capabilities of this camera? Well, this can shoot in 1080p, and it will shoot at 60 frames a second, 30 frames, and 24. Now, it does not shoot 4K, and I have my own thoughts on 4K, and I'll save that perhaps for another video, but in short, I don't really think you need 4K anyway. It's just my 2 cents on it, but if you want to shoot 4K, this does not offer that capability. What I want to talk about as well real quick is how does this compare to the T6i? This camera replaces the T6i, so I feel it's noteworthy to touch on it. To begin with, I talked about the maximum ISO of 25,600. The T6i is 12,800, so that's a nice improvement here. Number of focal points, again, this is 45, the T6i, 19. Continuous shooting, so when you hold the shutter button down, how fast will it shoot? Well, this will shoot at 6 frames a second, and the T6i is at 5, so you have a slight improvement there. Battery life is rated at 600 shots, whereas the T6i was 440. This has built-in time-lapse, which is nice, and another nice feature of this camera is the Wi-Fi capabilities. So this offers Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and NFC, which is the near-field communication. In short, you can connect to this in a variety of ways, and it makes it nice. Now, with all that said, let's jump into a quick video demonstration and test of this camera. I grabbed my Joby GorillaPod here. Now, I've used this in a handful of videos, and I really like this tripod. It works well in many different situations. I may post a link in the description below if you're interested. But what I did here is I took the locking plate and I attached it to the T7i. I'm going to go ahead and clip it onto our tripod. Now we're good to go here. I'm going to go ahead and pull out the screen and rotate it forward. And again, this will allow me to self-compose, and we'll go ahead and test this out. Now, I want you to keep in mind as we move forward, this video is really not to do a detailed hands-on how-to of every function in this camera. I can do some other videos on that, but this is really to dive into just real-world usage of this camera and to see how it performs, and I'll let you know my thoughts on it. So I have it turned on right now. It's self-composed, coming back at me, and I'm going to go ahead and adjust my lens just a little bit and pull it back, just like that. Now, I've got quite a bit of lighting behind me as the sun's starting to go down, but I'm going to go ahead and hit record, and we're recording right now. I'm going to go ahead and switch over the video to the camera right now, and now you can see me. And I'm going to go ahead as well and leverage the sound that's coming through the mic. So you should be able to hear me as well. Now, I don't have the steadiest of hands here, so this is also a good test of the video stabilization built into the camera. And I'm just going to walk around here a little bit and we'll see how well this camera maintains the stabilization. Now, I can tell you that this camera is not too heavy. I'm not sure I'd want to vlog in this way for long, but it seems to be working out pretty well. And hopefully it'll sound okay. Now, I know some people will use this type of method to do vlogging. And again, I think you could do this for a little while. I'm just not sure you'd want to carry it around for long. So hopefully this gives you a little example of kind of the video capabilities here and the sound of this camera. And what I want to do right now is jump into the meat and potatoes. And what I mean by that is I want to get into the photography portion of this review. So let's go ahead, jump right in, and have a lot of fun.
Leaving on a midnight train, Take me far away from here. Full moon hill shining, pale light. I'm driving you. Take me far away from here. Right now, 'cause I won't wait till I find my way back home. Right now, baby. Right now, baby. Right now, baby. Right now, baby. Catch you from the garden, better say prayer. This ain't no place of mercy, safety. Finally, take me far with me. 'Cause all our lives we play this game, dance on through, burning flame. I'm burning, baby. I'm burning, baby. I'm burning, baby. Burning, baby. Shadows on the wall, hanging by blue, crawling on my knees, seven leaves,
I hope you enjoyed those images. And now it's time for a few final thoughts. I created a relatively short list of pros and cons, and I'm going to start off with my list of cons because I just feel it's good to end on a positive note. So to begin with, I tested this camera's native JPEG settings. I wanted to see how this camera would perform because I recognize that many people who get into the world of photography will start out shooting JPEGs. And even if you've been shooting for a while, you may still continue to shoot JPEGs. Why? because you don't need to post-process. You can share these images right out of the camera straight to social media or with friends without having to do anything. The camera will do it for you. Now I feel that the color quality is good, but I felt that some of the images were relatively soft. Now this is to be expected to some extent because this camera has an AA filter in it. What is the AA filter? Well, that's the anti-aliasing filter. Now many of you have asked me before, you might say, well, I'm thinking about a Nikon or a Canon and I'm not sure which one to go with, and I may cite this as one of the differences depending on the models. The AA filter tends to make images relatively soft. It's that anti-aliasing filter that Nikon had removed from their upper-end cameras, and they also started to remove it from their entry-level cameras like the D3300, 3400, 3500. Canon had removed it from their higher-end cameras, but they have yet to remove it from some of their entry-level cameras and their prosumer cameras. So, is it that noticeable? No. It's just worth noting. That's all it really is. If you had two images side by side, you might see a slight difference in there. You can always post-process the JPEGs and sharpen them up a little bit if you want, but it's not that huge of a deal. It's just something worth noting. Now, the other thing that I picked up on deals with the ISO. Now, what I find interesting here is I like to manually adjust my ISO, and I may use the auto, which I did in this case on a couple of those shots just to test it out. I wanted to see how it would perform. One thing I've noticed with some other manufacturers is that they have the ability to select an ISO between stops. What do I mean by that? Well, in this case, if I use a stop of, say, 6400 on the ISO, and it's still a little dark, I may need to increase that to 12,800. That's a pretty good jump. Well, some of the other camera manufacturers have the ability to select an ISO that falls between the stops if you're using auto. But I noticed with this camera here that if you're using auto, it is not able to select between stops. I noticed that it just jumped from 6400 up to 12,800. Basically, it was simulating what I would do manually. Now, I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing, because it seemed to work well and it's what I would have done anyway. So it's just worth noting. Now, for a couple of pros here. To begin with, I feel that the high ISO capabilities of this camera are really good. Now, I took some of these shots that you can see in the examples, 12,800, and I think I'm going to include one in there that's going to be 25,600. Now, I don't know that I would ever typically use a shot at 25,600. However, I feel that the high ISO capabilities of this camera are that good that it makes it usable. Now, I want you to keep in mind that I did some post-processing here in Lightroom, and I leveraged the noise reduction feature. Now, I only did a little bit of post-processing, so I don't want you to think that I overdid anything here. But if you're shooting at 25,600 and you can still use an image with a little noise reduction, that's great, and that's definitely worthy of noting. The other nice feature to this camera right here is the 45-point autofocus system. Canon is notorious for having a great autofocusing system, and I don't think it's any different with this particular camera. So, what are my thoughts? My overall thoughts on this camera? Well, I really like this flip-out screen, and I think the touch capabilities are great. I think that this camera right here is really, really good to do a lot of video work. Now, many of you will ask me, hey, if I had to choose between a Canon and a Nikon, what do I do? Well, I've always kind of said that if you're into doing a lot of photography and you don't plan on doing much video, you may want to look at the Nikon side. It's not that Nikon doesn't shoot video, it's just that if you have a slight edge to give, it might be to the video for Canon cameras like this one right here. Now, does that mean that Canon doesn't shoot pictures? No, absolutely not. I think the image quality here is decent as well. My thought is that this is a great camera if you plan to shoot some photos and you definitely plan to do some videos. So, one other thing to think about here is the price point. Now, this camera, as of today, with the kit lens, is running around $950. I believe that this is really to compete more with the Nikon like D5600, where that Nikon camera has a flip-out screen as well. The image quality, though, of the Nikon D3400 or 3500 is very, very good, and the price point there is around $500. So it's just something to keep in mind. Just kind of weigh the features that this camera offers with that price point. And with that said, I hope that this video has helped you out. If it has, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't done so, subscribe to the channel. It's called Real World. More often than not, I post videos about photography and technology, but you never know. So until the next video, take care of yourself and be safe.